That day was the start of the most complicated, most forbidden moments of my life. I thought it was just a simple mistake, that it would end right there. But I was wrong. Even now, as I tell this story, I can feel my hands trembling because this isn't just a confession, it's a confrontation with my inner conflict, my shame, and my desires. Alfred was my mother's husband. He was mature, charismatic, and always had a confident presence. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to speak loudly to get attention. Most of the time, he was quiet around the house, but his presence was enough to fill any room. He was my mother's second husband, and we'd never been close. He was polite but distant. That is, until that day. The day everything changed. My mother, Jennifer, was out with her friends as usual. It was just Alfred and me at home. It was a quiet evening, or at least I thought it was going to be. I was in my room changing my clothes. I was standing in front of my mirror in my underwear about to put on my dress when I heard the door open slightly. "Emily, your door is open," Alfred said from the doorway. His voice soft, his tone was calm but strong enough to make me jump. I turned my head and saw his eyes were on me. Time seemed to freeze. I didn't know what to do. I didn't cover myself, but I didn't move either. He hesitated at the door, his hand on the handle like he was debating whether or not to come in. His gaze stayed on me, long enough for me to feel a wave of confusion and something else I couldn't explain. My heart was pounding in my chest. It was only a few seconds, but in those seconds everything felt different. "I'm sorry," he finally said, looking away, but his voice didn't sound completely apologetic. There was a hesitation in it, as if he wasn't sure if he was really sorry or not. He backed away, but even after he closed the door, his presence still lingered in the room. "It's okay," I murmured, my voice slightly shaky, but inside I knew it wasn't okay. Something inside me had shifted. I couldn't ignore it. He left, and I was left alone with my thoughts. But that look, that tension in the air was still with me. That moment was burned into my mind, and I couldn't shake it. I thought it was just a strange mistake, a weird interaction, and that it would just pass. But I was wrong. A few days later, the same thing happened, and it went much further this time. Up until that point, everything could be chalked up to a strange mistake, a mistimed interaction, and that's what I thought. But it didn't take me long to realize it wasn't going to stop there. That day was just the beginning. And now I'm going to tell you everything that happened from that moment on. The next day, we had to go to a wedding for one of my mother's close friends who was getting married for the second time. My mother was cheerful and excited as always. Jennifer had always been someone who liked to have fun, who was fond of her friends, but didn't really care much for the idea of deep loyalty. I, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled about going, but Alfred's presence at that wedding changed everything. We arrived at the venue together as the crowd swirled around us. I couldn't stop myself from looking at Alfred. Maybe he'd always been this handsome, this charismatic, and I just hadn't noticed it before, under the wedding lights. He seemed to exude confidence. His suit was perfectly tailored, and every step he took radiated an effortless charm. Meanwhile, I was trying to erase the thoughts from my mind. "Don't be ridiculous, Emily," I told myself, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. A dance song started to play. My mother and Alfred were in the middle of the dance floor, swaying to the rhythm. Jennifer was smiling, her usual carefree smile, but then suddenly, in the middle of the dance, she turned to me and grinned. "Alfred asked Emily to dance," she said. "I'm going to go chat with my friends for a bit." Something inside me stirred. My heart started to beat fast. Alfred hesitated for a moment, then smiled and held out his hand to me. His eyes had a relaxed, self-assured expression. "Come on, Emily," he said, his voice soft. "I need you to teach me a few moves." Jennifer already embarrassed me on the dance floor, despite his easygoing attitude embarrassing me. I couldn't refuse. I hesitantly extended my hand, answering with a shaky voice. "Okay." My nerves tightened as I walked toward the dance floor in front of the crowd. The moment his hand found its place on my waist, my breathing accelerated. His cologne, the warmth of his touch, it was all so real. This story is now heading in a completely different direction. If you're curious, be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. Your support means so much to me. Don't forget to like and comment as we danced. Alfred's eyes never left mine. "Emily, I didn't know you were so talented," he said with a warm smile. There was an allure in his voice that seeped into me. "It's really nice dancing with you." I looked away, trying not to show how I was feeling. "I'm just doing my best," I said, but the tremor in my voice gave me away. Alfred's smile softened even more. "Don't sell yourself short," he said. I felt his hand press more firmly into my waist. "This isn't just dancing, we're sharing something. Don't you feel it too?" At that moment, I realized that the connection between us wasn't just about the dance. My body moved in harmony with the music, but my heart and mind were out of control. The crowd around us, my mother, the noise, everything faded away. It was just Alfred and me, and the hands that were holding us. Still, the confusion and desire inside me were taking over during the dance. Alfred's voice cut softly yet deeply into my thoughts. "I wanted to apologize for the other day," he said. "I just wanted to warn you. But barging in like that, I think it was a little disrespectful of your space." A wave of warmth rose inside me, and I felt my cheeks flush. My gaze shifted down, but I wanted to ease the tension. "It's okay," I said quickly, my voice slightly shaking. "It really is okay. Things like that happen." Alfred paused for a moment, but didn't stop dancing. His eyes were still on me. His voice softened as he continued. "If I made you uncomfortable, I want you to know that wasn't my intention. I just wanted to get your attention." My heart started to beat faster. "I wasn't uncomfortable," I said, trying to assure him, while also fighting the strange excitement that was rising inside me. "It's really okay." The air between us intensified for a moment as we continued to dance. I could very clearly feel his hand on my waist and the sincerity in his gaze. It was stirring something deep inside of me, but the intensity didn't last long. We stopped dancing when the music slowly came to an end. "Thank you," Alfred said with a slight smile. "You really are a great dance partner." I just nodded my head, my heart still beating fast. "Thank you too," I said softly. Then I quickly went back to my table and sat down. Alfred paused for a moment, his eyes still on me. Then he went to another table. But at that moment, those looks, they made it clear that whatever was between us wasn't over. In fact, everything was just beginning when Jennifer returned to the wedding hall. She came over to us with a bright smile on her face. "That was such a beautiful dance," she said, congratulating us. "You both looked amazing." Her compliment made me feel even more nervous, but I tried not to care. "It was fun," I said with a small smile. Alfred just nodded politely, a faint smile on his lips. Jennifer continued talking, clapping her hands. "You know, after the wedding, I'm going to have a bachelorette party with the girls. Totally just us girls. Alfred, you'll take Emily home, right?" Alfred smiled slightly. "Of course, no problem," he replied easily. At that moment, I realized how unfair Jennifer was to Alfred on a night when he should be with her. She was leaving him alone. A feeling of unease formed inside me, but I suppressed it. Jennifer didn't seem to care. Having fun with her friends was her priority. When the wedding ended, Alfred and I walked to the car together. Jennifer had already left to go somewhere else with her friends. We got in the car, and Alfred started the engine in silence during the car ride. The silence between us was almost palpable. I looked out the window, trying to feel that I shouldn't fill the silence with words, but Alfred finally broke it. "Jennifer, sometimes her priorities are different," he said, his eyes on the road. "But still, I'm always surprised at how inconsiderate she can be. You'd expect your spouse to be there with you on nights like this, wouldn't you?" His voice was calm and thoughtful, but there was a disappointment underneath his words. Resonated within me. It made my heart ache to think that someone as strong, charismatic, and confident as Alfred could feel alone. I replied, my voice slightly shaky. "Yes, I think it's important to be a little more thoughtful at times like these. Alfred nodded, his head slightly. You're right, he said, his gaze still on the road. But I guess every relationship is different at that moment. I felt an unspoken connection form between us. It was as if I could understand, even feel, Alfred's loneliness. I was trying to suppress my own feelings. That short conversation seemed to have brought me even closer to him. The connection between us was silently but powerfully growing. When we got home, Alfred opened the door and gestured for me to go inside. Good night, he said, but it was obvious from his hesitation that he wasn't really ready to leave. As I walked towards my room, I realized that Alfred was still standing by the door. A strange impulse stopped me, and I turned to him. Alfred, I said, my voice a whisper, would you like to come in? Maybe we could talk for a bit. I could see from Alfred's eyes that he wanted to stay, but he politely refused. He was hesitant after what had happened the other day. I'd invited him in to show him I'd moved past it, to let him know it was no longer an issue. But instead, I found myself retreating to my room. I kept replaying Jennifer's behavior and Alfred's words in my mind. I could feel his loneliness. It was affecting me more than I had expected. I sat on the edge of my bed trying to calm down, but the thoughts in my mind wouldn't stop. Why was I thinking about him so much? Why did I keep repeating the moment he accidentally walked into my room that day? The hours passed and the house became quiet. Jennifer still hadn't come back, and I had no idea what Alfred was doing while I was struggling with my thoughts. My door suddenly opened, freezing me in place. I looked up and saw Alfred standing in the doorway, a determination in his eyes, but his expression conflicted. I quickly stood up. Alfred, I said, not being able to hide the shock in my voice. What are you doing here? He closed the door behind him, but didn't go any further into the room.
Instead, he just stood there as if he was arguing with himself. Emily? He began, his voice low but emotional. You're right. Jennifer isn't being fair to me. But tonight, I don't care what Jennifer does or doesn't do. He took a step closer, his gaze locked on mine. For a while now, I've been feeling something for you, he confessed, his voice firm but hesitant, especially since that day when I accidentally walked into your room. I can't get it out of my mind. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think, Alfred continued, as if determined to get everything off his chest, regardless of the consequences. Maybe I'll regret saying this. Maybe I'm making a big mistake, but I can't keep it inside anymore, Emily. I think about you all the time. He paused, studying my face to see my reaction. He could see the shock in my eyes. He took another step closer, his voice softening. You understand me, Emily. Maybe you're not aware of it, but you see me. That's something Jennifer has never been able to do. My heart was beating so fast I thought it was going to burst. The weight of the moment was unbearable. I wanted to answer, but no words came to mind. Alfred finally broke eye contact. His gaze falling to the floor, he took a deep breath and swallowed. I'm sorry, Emily, he said, his voice quiet and almost fragile. I shouldn't have said any of that. I should go. He turned around and started walking towards the door. His steps were firm, but it was clear that each step carried a burden. As he reached for the door handle, I noticed his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. It was then that something changed inside me. All my fears and confusion melted away, replaced by a courage I didn't know I possessed. I couldn't let him leave. Alfred? I called out, my voice like a whisper, but strong enough to fill the room. He stopped. He turned slowly towards me, his eyes meeting mine. There was a turmoil in them, a battle between regret and longing playing out in his eyes. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, with trembling hands, I slipped the straps of my dress off my shoulders, letting it fall to the floor. The dim light of the room highlighted the bare skin of my shoulders, and the way the cool air hissed my body. I knew Alfred's gaze was on me, intense and unwavering. I knew he was watching my every move, and I couldn't look away. I haven't forgotten either, Alfred, I said, my voice trembling, though the determination inside me was strong enough to overshadow it. That day, the moment you walked into my room, everything changed. I'd been trying to suppress these feelings ever since, but I can't because I like you too. Maybe I've liked you for a long time. As the words poured out of my mouth, my heart was beating so fast I thought it would jump out of my chest. Alfred was silent for a moment, his eyes studying mine as if trying to understand what I was saying. But in those eyes, I could feel the same pull, the same undeniable connection. "Tonight," I said, taking a deep, decisive breath, "I don't want to fight these feelings anymore. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but this is what I feel." Alfred took another step closer, his hands gently touching my face. His touch was both delicate and careful, as if he was afraid to ruin the moment when our eyes met. I felt that all the distance between us was just an illusion. He leaned in slowly and his lips met mine. That first kiss released all the feelings and desires that we'd both been suppressing for so long. Alfred's touch, his kisses, grew more and more intense with each passing second. I never even considered stopping, pulling back. I was completely lost in the moment. I took a step back, slowly, until I felt the edge of the bed touch the back of my legs. I let myself fall onto the bed. I watched Alfred's hands move toward the buttons of his shirt, each one carefully undone. Each movement seemed like he wanted to savor the moment, to stretch it out forever. When he finally slipped his shirt off his shoulders, his confident, authoritative presence seemed to fill the whole room. He took another step towards me, his gaze never leaving mine. After carefully putting his clothes at the edge of the bed, he approached me closer until there was nothing between us except the electricity in the air. The air between us was filled only with passion and desire. Time seemed to have stopped. There was only that moment, only us. He leaned over me and we experienced a union where we were completely surrendered to each other. It was so emotional, I felt something big and warm inside me. It was different, something I'd never felt before. When I looked at Alfred, I could see his broad shoulders and muscular body. I closed my eyes, lifted my arms, and pressed tightly into the pillow, trying to follow the movements of Alfred's body. At that moment, my body convulsed powerfully. I said, "You're very special. I always knew it, but I understand it better now." He was out of breath. "You are too, Alfred," I said, and a warmth spread inside me. Everything was like a dream. The moment Alfred lay down next to me, I rested my head on his chest. As I leaned against his strong chest, I could hear the rhythm of his heart. The reality of the moment brought both peace and a deep turmoil within me. My fingers gently traced patterns on his chest as I gathered the courage to break the silence. "You didn't accidentally walk into my room this time, Alfred," I said, my voice low but full of meaning. I lifted my head and met his gaze. My words were forcing him to accept the truth, but also revealing the turmoil within me. Alfred smiled slightly, but couldn't hide the depth of his thought on his face. "No, Emily," he said. "None of what's happening is a coincidence, but I needed to tell you how I felt, no matter how hard it was." I lowered my gaze back to his chest, my fingers slowing to a stop. I took a deep breath and spoke again. "You're a very special and incredibly attractive man, Alfred," I said softly, "but what happens after this? How will we continue, my mother people?" Alfred tilted his head slightly, pulling me closer to him as he ran his fingers through my hair. His voice was calm, but full of emotion. "I don't know, Emily. All I know is that right now everything is real. Feeling you, being close to you. I can't deny it." His words were only deepening the storm inside me. But at the same time, his honesty was putting me at ease. I closed my eyes, focusing on the warmth of his presence as the uncertainty of the future lingered over us all. We could do in that moment was feel each other. If you've made it this far, I know my story has deeply affected you. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss any of it. Make sure you hit that follow button, turn on notifications,